Hello, I'm Michael Alvarez, Regional Manager for Cal-OSHA Consultation. Let's talk about scaffold safety. It is estimated that 2.3 million American construction workers work on scaffolds. That is about 65% of the construction industry. Did you know that 4,500 injuries and 50 deaths involve scaffold accidents each year? Most of these injuries involve falls and struck-bys. Preventing is education, therefore you must learn how to protect yourself through safety training. The training must include best practices in equipment safety. Who should inspect scaffolds and what should you look for? This video is not a comprehensive safety program. For clarification and specific information for your job site, please consult with your supervisor. Thank you.
Scaffolding provides work areas large enough to hold workers, necessary supplies, and equipment. The purpose of this training is to discuss safe work behaviors on elevated work surfaces. We will review some of the basic knowledge that you should have before working on scaffolds. Inexperienced employees are often most vulnerable to developing risky behaviors using scaffolds and need specific safety training at the beginning of their employment. This training DVD is set up in chapters to allow quick access to specific subjects. You have the option to include or exclude chapters as needed for customizing your training session's needs. The chapters are: 1. Daily on-site inspection of scaffolding. 2. Fall hazards. 3. Using designated access areas for egress onto and off scaffolding. 4. Rolling scaffolds. 5. Personal protective equipment. 6. Conclusion. Each individual worker needs to be aware of all safety requirements for their job. Scaffolds should be inspected continuously by those using the scaffold. The industry best practice is that scaffolds be inspected for safe condition before use or shift, and Cal-OSHA Construction Safety Order 1644C1 states that all manufacturers' instructions shall be followed. Scaffolding erected on a construction site is used by many trades and subcontractors. This multi-user process often leads to conditions of defective scaffolding. Therefore, the responsibility for safety on the worksite is up to you.
Hi, I'm Tom Falkenstein. I'm with the Cal-OSHA Consultation Services Office out of Oakland. A lot of my clients are construction contractors, many of whom use scaffolding. So scaffolding is something that I look at quite often on a construction work site. Some of the first things that I look for when I walk up to a scaffold is I look to see, is it plumb and square? The easiest way to check to see if it's plumb, buildings are built straight up and down. If the scaffold is not parallel to the building, it's a pretty good idea that it's not plumb. Have the braces kept the scaffold square and the frames square to each other? Is it level? Are the base plates and legs set in a manner to keep the scaffold flat and level and the work platform level for the workers to be on? The next thing I'll check is to see what kind of condition the scaffold frames are actually in. Are they cracked? Are they dented? Are they twisted? Are they bent? If the scaffold has any kind of damage to the frame, you can't use it because it affects the integrity of the structure itself, and with a weakened structure, it could collapse, and if people are on it when it collapses, we're going to have people hurt. The frames have also got to be assembled properly. The pins need to hold the tubes and the frames in place. There need to be pins between the tubes and the frames, and if there's a potential for the scaffold to be bumped or upset, then those pins need to be actually connected to the legs physically so that the scaffold can't be upset and collapse. The next thing to look at are the cross bracings. Are they properly attached? They need to be attached to the pins in the scaffold frame panel and not simply wired to the scaffold frames themselves. Another thing that must be installed on a scaffold are guardrails. The guardrails will be 42 to 45 inches above the work platform for the top rail, with an intermediate railing or mid-rail halfway between the two. Planking is another element that you need to look at. That is your work platform. If you have a plank that is broken, cracked, split, or otherwise damaged, that could be hazardous to work on. Do not use them for work platforms behind you to do your jobs. The scaffold planking has got to be covering the space between the uprights on the panels. There can be no more than 1 inch between the scaffold planks themselves, and at the back of the scaffold it can be no more than 10 inches of gap between the last scaffold and the guardrail. If there's room to put a plank, you should add another plank to the scaffold. All work platforms have got to be at least 20 inches in width, but all scaffolds must be fully planked between the uprights. Scaffold planking at the corners must also be properly installed. Scaffold planking must overlap the work platform that it's perpendicular to completely. The reason for this is the scaffold planking that it's overlapping will bear the full load of the crossing scaffold planks instead of a single plank trying to bear the full load. This will affect the structure and the safety for the individuals working on the platform. As an example of the scaffold planking at the corners, you can see this is what it should look like. Once the scaffold's been erected and the planking and guardrails in place, never remove any of the components of the scaffold. Scaffolds are designed and intended to support not only themselves but 4 times the intended workload. Any modifications to the scaffold structure are going to weaken it, and as a result you're going to end up with a potential collapse and injured or killed employees. To climb onto a scaffold, never use the diagonal bracing or any of the support members of the frame panels. Climbing on the frames is not advised simply because it's bad handholds and bad footholds. A ladder, a stairwell or stairway, or some of the trap door systems that they now have for scaffold access is the only proper methods to be used to access your scaffold. Anytime a scaffold has people working below it or passing underneath the scaffold, toe boards are required to be fitted at the work platform in those areas. Toe boards must be at least 4 inches in height and can be no more than 1/4 inch above the plank that they're resting on. The purpose of toe boards is to keep debris, material, supplies, and whatever from being kicked off of the work platform onto employees working below. If you are in a work situation where you're required to drop things from the scaffold planking or structure itself, you need to barricade the area that you'll be dropping the material onto, post a spotter, put up warning signs, otherwise take measures to keep people out of that area. Other measures to prevent employees from being struck by falling objects, which are commonly referred to as struck-bys, would be to provide debris nets, mesh screens, or covers that will go between the guardrails and the toe board to keep debris from going over the side or materials from falling over the side.
When working on scaffolds, preventing falls must always be on your mind. Don't use a scaffold if it is wet or slippery, and never jump or run on a scaffold. Falls are by far the most frequent cause of accidents while working on scaffolds. They also cause the most severe injuries and in many cases death. A body in free fall covers distance very quickly. A person falls 4 feet in half a second. In 1 second, 16 feet. In 2 seconds, 64 feet. The impact of even a 4-foot fall can cause serious injury. If your job site requires the use of a personal fall arrest system, your supervisor will give you specific training for the proper use of this equipment.
When we talk about fall protection and scaffolding, we always think of the acronym, or the A, B, C, and D of fall protection. And if we can remember that, we're going to be a lot safer. A is for the anchorage point, B is for the body harness, C is for the connectors, and D is for the deaccelerating devices, which is going to limit our impact. First thing we're going to talk about is A, is the anchorage point. An anchorage point is critical, and generally the anchorage point is listed as a 5,000-pound anchorage point. If you have a scaffold on a job site, sometimes we can anchor to a scaffold, but you need to check on your job site, and it is job site specific, to make sure that the anchorage point is approved by a qualified person. For instance, we cannot anchorage to an aluminum rolling scaffold at any place, but a lot of the steel job site scaffold that we're on, we are able to anchorage to. The body harness has to reduce the impact load on the body, and we have to make sure that our body harnesses are appropriate for the job we're doing and that they've properly been inspected. We need to look at all of those things before we ever put a harness on. Right, here's my cross-chest harness. Basically, the only place I can attach to this harness is the back D-ring here on your back. The item that goes to that would be your deaccelerating device, your lanyard, something like that. It's important that when you put your harness on, it's properly adjusted. It needs to fit across the subpelvic strap, needs to fit across the bottom of the pelvis or the butt here, and it has to be on there nice and secure. We don't want this so tight that it cuts off the blood flow, but we don't want it on so loose that it's going to create a hazard to us when and if we fall. When you put your harness on, it's absolutely important that you inspect your harness every time. That's not the safety officer's job, that's your job. And you put your body harness on, you need to inspect it. This is a pretty good body harness, but as I inspected my body harness, I saw on the subpelvic strap a cut in that subpelvic strap. That was enough to take this body harness out of service. But never ever put a body harness on again when you have things like this in your pocket. Keys, knives, flashlights, those kinds of things in your pocket go exactly underneath the leg strap of your body harness. If you are in a fall and this key decides to puncture your femoral artery, you're going to be in big trouble. It's very easy to clean your pockets out, put them in the toolbox, put them somewhere, but get them out of your pockets because that's an accident waiting to happen. Next thing we're going to go to is the third, or the C portion of personal fall arrest. We need a connector. Excuse me, the connector is often referred to as a carabiner or a hook. These are all things that connect you to an anchorage point. When you're using connectors, you have to have a double locking, self-closing connector. Why is a double acting connector so critical? I took this off of a job site. This is a 6-foot lanyard with a single acting hook on this. This is a problem that we see, and it's called rollout. And that's how easily this can disconnect. We use this or have it hooked up to a carabiner. This carabiner, we could actually roll right out of this device and it can come right apart. So it's absolutely critical that we have a double locking hook. The fourth part, or the D, is the deaccelerating device. The deaccelerating device is usually found in a 6-foot lanyard, something like this. This lanyard could also be a 4-foot lanyard. Now what a deaccelerating device does is has a shock pack built in, whether it's enclosed with cloth, whether it's enclosed with a shrink wrap pack. This package has 42 inches of material that in a fall will slow your acceleration so that we don't have an impact force at the end of the fall. This is why we call this a deaccelerating pack. This is the part that limits our impact load now, according to OSHA, to 1,800 pounds. Anchorage points, body harnesses. connectors, and deaccelerating devices. Critical things to remember: job site specific on all of your equipment. Make sure that they're always inspected before you put them on. Make sure that a certified or a qualified individual approves the anchorage point. If you're not sure, make sure. Ask somebody that can give you a affirmative on a proper anchorage point. All of these things are critical, and all of these are going to help you get home to the family that you love and care about at the end of each day.